Hey everyone, welcome to Cannabis Technologists. With me today, I have Saul Singer. Saul is the co-founder and CEO of CMTREX, which is it's actually an acronym for Cannabis Mercantile Trading Exchange. I got Saul from Tel Aviv, Israel. How are you doing today, Saul?
Rob, I'm doing great over here in sunny Tel Aviv. Thank you. It's a real pleasure. I must say also an honor to be on the show so soon into our development. I suppose just as a side note, me as a new entrant into this amazing industry, I found that both your webcast and the CannabisTech porthole has been a wonderful resource for me. So kudos to you and to the team, and keep up the good work. It's guys like me who need you to continue doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Saul. I can honestly say it's one of the most fascinating spaces I've ever worked in, and there's never a dull day. So I'm really curious to learn about what you're doing, because you too are also on you're pioneering a really interesting exchange. For our viewers, I'm going to kind of break down very quickly your background, Sal. Sal's a seasoned entrepreneur. Excuse me. He has a seasoned entrepreneurial experience in managing businesses from startup all the way to monetization. Sal has a strong background in international financial advisory and consulting firms. He co-founded Fusion Alternatives in 2006, which grew into a leading independent inventory trading ecosystem in the global diamond industry, and now has transitioned to an exchange that's cannabis related. So, Sal, one of the things I wanted to ask you just to start out with is, as one of the world leaders in innovation, it's no surprise that Israel is a driving force in the cannabis industry, and how is it that CMTREX is strategically positioned to facilitate the emergence of a transparent and efficient trading ecosystem for the global legal cannabis and hemp markets? Why don't we start there?
Yeah, Rob, great question, and I think your question really speaks to some of the implicit driving forces behind CMTREX, and that is ultimately innovation. CMTREX is essentially an IT solutions company, and what's more, our entry into this new industry for us, this cannabis industry, to some extent makes us somewhat of a startup company again. And I suppose what better place to do this than in Israel, which is alternatively known as the startup nation. So I don't know all the statistics or whatnot, but roughly for a country with about 8 to 8.5 million inhabitants, I think it's ranked about 4th or 5th in the number of patents per capita. I think it leads the world in the number of employees in R&D and related services, as well as having the highest expenditure in IT, innovation and technology, I think, compared to all OECD members. But I think beyond all these empirical statistics, and there's more of that out there, ultimately, Israel has a tremendous spirit, infrastructure, and ecosystem of innovation. And this is especially, I think, prevalent in both the IT solution space and obviously, as you alluded to, Rob, in the cannabis sector. So CMTREX is, I think, uniquely positioned to leverage of this tremendous ecosystem across both those two sectors, being, IT solutions and cannabis. I think that the other point here is, one has to recognize that this evolving story, I suppose, is one way of putting it, this evolving story of legalization of the cannabis industry is not merely like a US-centric story, but I think rather the story has a very global narrative.
Sure.
So being located, I think, outside the US, in the US at the moment being a relatively fragmented market with different rules and regulations across those fragmented markets, our peers over there seem to be sometimes stuck in this quagmire of, market-specific focus. Being outside of that play, I think, provides us with a certain ability to keep our finger on the pulse right across the globe. Further points, although I'm as co-founder and CEO of an IT solutions company, I myself, I don't view myself as being a techie. You know, I leave that up to my wonderful CTO and his team of amazing programmers. But I view myself as a business strategist. And I think as this legal cannabis industry continues to emerge and develop right across the globe, what we're really seeing today is the formation of building blocks upon which this industry is very quickly being built. And to myself, I liken this to, I suppose, you know, someone throwing pieces of a puzzle across the table, and I'm in the business of trying to put those pieces together. You know, obviously at its core, CMTREX is an IP-driven trading platform that's been proven in a relatively similar industry, you know, that being the diamond industry. But at the moment, I'm much more interested in plugging into the right collaborative partners. And thankfully, I'm extremely fortunate to have found such a partner, you know, in Saul K and his ICANN Israel Cannabis team. You know, CMTREX wasn't only co-founded by myself and ICANN, but CMTREX is the first portfolio company in ICANN's incubation program. I'm pretty sure, you know, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm pretty sure, Rob, at least some of your listeners are aware of ICANN's footprint across the multiple sectors of this global diamond industry. And essentially, this allows CMTREX to provide a trading platform that will be plugged into an existing and formidable global ecosystem of stakeholders right throughout the cannabis and hemp pipelines. So I suppose to recap, you know, what positions us very strategically is, you know, our physical location in Israel and all that goes with it. We are very much an innovation-driven company with an innovation-driven ethos. And we're currently in the business of implementing collaborative partnership model with partners of the caliber of ICANN. You know, that's something that we're very, very excited about over here.
Sure. And, you know, Saul, I was, just to add to your answer, I was in MJ in Denver, Colorado, the big marijuana or big cannabis conference in November in 2017. Yeah. And I would say probably a quarter of the speakers there, the leading technology experts, were Israeli-based. And I expected some of that, but not that extent of a footprint. I mean, it was pretty impressive, some of the budding technology that was all Israeli-based.
Yeah, correct. It really is. I mean, even being in it, as you said, when you go to these international arenas, it really is very prominent, and you know, it's almost like a grassroots movement over here. You know, innovation, IT. It really, the culture really spurs this type of innovation, and from an infrastructure level, it's coming. You know, it's both, you know, bottom up and top down. You know, it's also coming from the government. There are great, you know, incentive programs flowing through and things like that. So, you know, there's always room for improvement, but I think, yeah, no, it's absolutely astonishing.
Excellent. Well, let's transition to requisite trading and blockchain integration. What is it? What is requisite trading solution, and how critical is blockchain integration to the trading ecosystem? Is this where cannabis-related marketplaces or other cannabis-related marketplaces fall short? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Rob, great question. You know, I think there are a number of buzzwords floating around the industry at the moment, obviously one of them being blockchain, which we'll get to, but I think it's important to differentiate between what technology can bring to the cannabis industry going forward and what market participants actually require today. And that's a key differentiation that has to be made. You know, obviously the end game for us at CMTREX is a fully integrated exchange-based trading system, you know, with all the bells and whistles, whether it's derivative trading instruments, financial liquidity, IT-driven authentication processes. But what I'm hearing from active growers and processors in the market is that, you know, they say to us, we know how to produce the product, but we really need a better means to effectively market and sell the product, not in the future, but today, well, effectively not only today, but yesterday. So I think, you know, this industry, you know, as you mentioned in the intro, your very kind intro, by the way, I've been involved in a number of different industries, but this industry is moving at, 100, probably much more than 100 miles an hour. And there's a significant proportion of market participants. They're just simply trying to keep their eyes on the road, hang on to the wheel, and sort of they're traveling at this breakneck pace. But if somehow, if one is able to take, a step back and try to take somewhat of a holistic view of what's going on, I think that sort of comes to the realization that there are a number of key paradigm shifts that are currently taking place. Obviously the big paradigm shift is the shift from being an illicit to a legal global market. But there are a number of other paradigm shifts going on, whether it's in the research space or in the authentication, testing space, for example. But for us here at CMTREX, we're looking to facilitate another paradigm shift, that is allowing suppliers of the product in this market to move from a very bilateral, over-the-counter, one-to-one transactions, one supplier to one buyer, over-the-counter transactions, to more efficient mode of trade, I suppose, whereby transactions are one-to-many, and eventually to move out, to build out to many-to-many based transactions. Notwithstanding, obviously, the big question is the legal challenges involved in this, particularly in high THC products. But I can tell you that suppliers are crying out for the ability to market their inventory to as many accredited and, I suppose, relevant buyers as possible. And, this is what us at CMTREX are going to be focusing on in our preliminary stage and rollout stage of our services.
Gotcha. So, Saul, can we dive a little deeper into the weeds? Can you tell us how CMTREX plans on growing with the market?
Yeah, as just previously mentioned, we're initially focusing on what market participants need today. As such, we're planning to roll out a suite of products over the course of the next, let's say, 24 months to address these needs, which will include, the CMTREX digital B2B marketplace, a CMTREX tender service, and also a CMTREX bespoke brokerage service. And those are three areas that we've clearly identified that are needed in today's market.
Gotcha. So let's contrast cannabis from other commodity exchanges. What have the challenges been so far? I know you were at Fusion and you were into the global diamond industry. What have been some of the stumbling blocks, if any?
Yeah, I think we sort of have to break up the space into, pure, let's call it commodity exchanges, whether it's the commodity exchanges under the ICE platforms or the CME platforms in the United States, the Chicago Board of Trade and whatnot, and differentiate that from, let's call it the quasi-commodity space, where there are commodities out there where it's not really traded over an exchange. There aren't any real spot transactions going on. There's no clear transparency in pricing. And I think both, the global diamond market squarely fits into that space. Let's call it the quasi-commodity space. And I think cannabis also squarely fits right in there. There have been moves, but until today, it's not really, the product is not traded over any real exchange. And, when we speak about price transparency, it's really not apparent as yet, but it is moving in that way. And then when you layer on top of that, to address your question in terms of the challenges, obviously the biggest challenge is the legal and jurisdictional elements of that. That's one of the biggest. But in terms of creating a market, a transparent and efficient market, where in one end goes in inventory and transactions, and the other end it spits out, real-time data, and which eventually leads onto price transparency. I think that's where cannabis finds itself today, and these are the things that we're attempting to address at CMTREX.
Okay. So having grown technology-driven trading platforms, in the past, with markets with a similar dynamic to cannabis. Can you project the type of volume we may see from CMTREX over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah.
You have a crystal ball?
Yeah, great question. I think we have, over here we have like a Talmudic saying. I think it pretty much goes along the lines of, prophecy has been given to the fools. And Rob, I think it was one of on your recent episodes. I think it was even Greg Gammett it was a Gold Flora. I think he provided like a great insight to new entrants into this industry. He said you should write your business plan in pencil. So I think this ever-evolving evolution of the industry at this breakneck pace, I think we have to put these projections into context. You've also caught me, and hence the, I suppose, the cynical giggle after you asked me the question. And you've really caught me at the brink of us closing our current round of financing. So I would be a real fool, to start prophesizing about our volume projections going forward in this public forum. But having said that, we at CMTREX, we're an ancillary technology play on a global scale in a market that at the moment has no real leader, or no real leader has yet to emerge. And this market is growing at a staggering, annual growth rate, both in terms of uptake and in terms of trade. So I think, we've got a great team. We've got a clear vision. We're plugged into an unbelievable ecosystem at ICANN. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got a vested interest in giving back to this amazing and emerging industry. I suppose, in short, I remain cautiously optimistic about our prospects here. Have I been able to adequately dodge your question?
Yes, I think you did. I kind of put you on the spot with a tough one. And your answer was interesting because I think it transcends a lot of spaces. It certainly does for CannabisTech.com. I mean, we're really on that frontier, which is incredibly exciting and interesting and inspirational, but there's also a sense of now what? So I understand. I thought you answered it really well. I just want to kind of end with just a question, Sal, regarding what kinds of things can we look for from CMTREX for the rest of 2018? More specifically, what can people look to come from you guys? Is there anything on the horizon?
Definitely. Listen, we're very excited about our planned launch of the CMTREX B2B digital marketplace. We're launching at the upcoming CannabisTech Global Summit to be held in Sydney, Australia at the end of October. Ultimately, this is, and that's a plug for the Global Summit. But, ultimately, this is going to be a secure digital marketplace bringing together the world's leading wholesale cannabis suppliers and buyers. We've learned, I think you've alluded to, we've learned from our experience in the global diamond industry that the mitigation of reputational risk is really paramount in this space. As such, right from the outset, CMTREX is going to be very, very focused on authentication, whether that's authentication of market participants or authentication of the product or products being traded. I think you'll find that this is going to be very apparent across all of our service offerings as we roll them out over the course of the next 24 months or so. The other piece I think that's integral to the CMTREX platform is the sophisticated data capturing and data learning layer that sits behind the transactional layer, so to speak. As our business ramps up, our buy-sell matching algorithms will really start to kick in, providing further trading efficiencies to our members. And I think, overall price transparency to all stakeholders in the market as a whole. In terms of, CMTREX's tender service, I think, Rob, you'll find this quite interesting because it not only speaks to the traditional suppliers and buyers of the product, we believe it's going to be an important tool for other stakeholders, whether it be the regulatory bodies or trade associations. Essentially in the tender service, we're speaking about whether it's tendering or auctioning of vetted cannabis products on behalf of approved clients. You know, from our experience in the past, we know from the supplier perspective, this is a proven method to achieve and maximize the price of inventory for suppliers. And from a stakeholder perspective, you know, it allows for a real-time snapshot of the state of the given market in terms of both pricing and demand. So those are two service suites that we'll be rolling out that we're very excited about. And, you know, going back to what we were saying before, you know, when we went public with the formation of CMTREX about 4 weeks ago, we immediately began to receive both buy and sell requests, which obviously we've subsequently begun to fulfill and put onto the platform in the beta phase. So, you know, I think this service of old school, you know, bespoke brokerage service layered on a very sophisticated IT platform is something that's already it's already generating great momentum, and I think we're going to see more of that in the coming months. And I think, yeah, those would be the three areas that I think your listeners can look out for.
Fascinating stuff, Saul. Great answer. Hey, we're going to wrap this up, and I really appreciated the education. It's exciting what you guys are on the forefront of, and I want to be able to direct our listeners to who want to learn more about you and CMTREX. Where can we send them?
Well, the best place is our website, which is www.cmtrex.com. That is C for Charlie, M Trex, as you hear it, .com. That's the best place to start. And there's a link there for any of the listeners who have any inquiries. Our customer relations team will follow up on any inquiries that we receive.
Excellent. Loved our conversation, Saul. Can we do this again?
I would love that. It's been a pleasure from my end. And again, thank you so much for all the endeavors over there at Cannabis Technologists. It's really a great resource for us over here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Saul.
All the very best, guys.
That's it, everyone. See you next time.